you're kind of it's very bureaucratic, and when you're covering courts, when you're covering crime, I mean, at least for me, when I was doing it, it was very frustrating. It was very frustrating to see the lack of justice, and a lot of victims suffer for the rest of their lives, or lose their lives at the hands of people who were very violent and terrible people. And I can say that. I don't judge people by their worst mistakes, but there are some people who are just blatantly terrible people. And to face absolutely no justice. But Kim Bolan is someone who really, she digs deep into that, and she's got some really solid sources.
Let me ask you this. I saw some kind of political stuff happening in Canada recently. What was that about? Are you familiar with that at all?
We had an election. We have a new prime minister. And this is like one thing to put out to the American audience here, right? So a liberal leader has been elected as the prime minister of Canada. Now, it's really important to understand that the Canadian Liberal Party does not match that of the American Democratic Party. It's very different. Um, the Liberals of Canada are typically, I mean, really, other than our previous prime minister Justin Trudeau, are typically more centrist. Okay, now under Justin Trudeau, who was the prime minister for a decade, um, we saw a lot of changes, particularly when it came to, I guess, my biggest grievances, which are organized crime, addiction crisis, the resources for that. And so going forward, it'll be very interesting to see how this changes, just because Carney, our new prime minister, is quite different than the previous one. And he's actually supposed to meet with Trump this week, and he said that don't expect, the white smoke based on my first meeting with Trump. But I think that there should be more of a kind of common ground here. I'm not sure how it's going to work out. It's going to be really interesting. I don't vote. I don't participate in Canadian politics because it's just tough.
So, from your perspective right now, you think you're interested in seeing what it's going to look like between Trump and the new prime minister? Are you? I guess all the Canadian people, are they hoping that they're going to crack down on violence? I know there's a big immigration issue out there. They just started realizing it more, and the Border Patrol up in Canada started to how do I say, they started to up their game on how to work a border based on we're having people coming in from America, but also other countries. So Canada, I know, is taking steps towards securing their borders a lot better. But I'm imagining when you're voting a new prime minister, you're looking at all the things, and the crime that's happening in Canada right now has to be one of the big ones that's trying to be addressed, right?
Listen, Canada's referred to as a cultural mosaic. It's extremely diverse, and I think that's incredibly beautiful. I mean, especially for me, right? Like my paternal family from Poland, my maternal family from India. You couldn't get more fucking mixed than that. So it's great. However, the lack of regulations around immigration has caused not only a big problem for a lot of Canadians struggling economically, but it's also caused more racism in a country that typically was not really like racist like that. I mean, people are gonna probably say that's cap, but whatever. um,
For my older audience, cap means a lie.
is a lie. Yeah. Sorry about that. But I think that going forward, there will be a crackdown on immigration policies, because towards the end of Justin Trudeau's term, we kind of saw him backtrack that, in terms of like re-implementing a visa requirement for Mexican nationals, changing the protocol around Indian nationals coming into Canada, whether it's like for a student visa, work and living visa. And so this started to change the work towards the end, because in the beginning of his administration, he really loosened a lot of these policies, leading to this like immigration insurgence, which, to be honest, I never really had a problem with in Canada, because that's kind of the point of Canada. We have like a ton of land, not enough people. There's always like these government incentives to continue to like populate the country. So you need immigrants. Like it makes sense, okay? And like I come from a family of immigrants from two very different places, as do most Canadians. Like so okay, fair. But the way he led his policies just took Canadians down a road where a lot of people now are really struggling, and it's caused for a lot of animosity against new immigrants, and I can understand that. I covered a lot of this when I was still working at the national broadcaster in Canada. The amount of Canadian families who are using the food banks is absolutely ridiculous. It's a very high percentage, and it's middle class, even upper middle class families that are supplementing their weekly or monthly groceries with the food banks. And I can understand why, a family like that would say, well, perhaps if we didn't have so many people coming in, and there's always a scapegoat, um, but there is also at the same time poor policy that can lead to a deterioration of society's perception of immigration. And that's really unfortunate, especially in a country that's made up of immigrants, especially in a country that's very diverse and celebrates all cultures. I love it, to be honest. Like for me, if I didn't grow up like that, I definitely would not speak all the languages that I do. I wouldn't be like this fake Mexican girl. To me, it's very beautiful. But I do understand Canadians' grievances with poor policies. Like an example that I said was the way a lot of cartel associates and members took advantage of the fact that they did not need a visa and they could easily apply and be granted refugee status to then operate in Canada. And this
Yeah.
was particularly exacerbated during Trump's first term, when he really cracked down on that southern border, and that northern border was left wide open. So it'll be really interesting to see if this new Canadian federal government will look at the border as an issue. I think for right now their main concern is the economy, and Canadian voters, their number one concern in terms of voting was the economy.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to pay attention to that and see how the drug trade potentially changes, shifts, slows down, or picks up with the new prime minister in. I know, the Border Patrol makes their efforts on the northern border. I'm curious to see if the Border Patrol themselves pivot some of their strategy to the northern border. There's been a lot of talks of that. And so anything when you start putting more personnel on the line, you start slowing down the traffic, or they start trying to find a different route. And so it's very interesting times right now on the borders. But let's pivot real quick to your new venture, Dispatches.
Yes.
And yes. So tell us
Exciting.
about